The battlefield was silent. Jonathan lay lifeless, his body broken beside his father, King Saul. The sun burned down on Mount Gilboa, turning the earth to dust as messengers rushed to bring the news to David. When he heard it, he collapsed. His breath caught in his throat, his heart splintered. The warrior, the giant slayer, the future king, David wept like a man who had lost everything. "Jonathan, my brother, your love for me was more wonderful than the love of women." These are David's own words, 2 Samuel 1 verse 26. Yet, history has often dismissed them. Was this merely brotherhood, or something deeper? Something the Bible never told us properly? In an era where kings married for power and love was rarely spoken of, the bond between David and Jonathan defied expectations. They met as strangers, swore eternal loyalty, and risked death for each other. Their story is one of love, sacrifice, and devotion, but also of silence. What if the Bible's greatest love story wasn't between a man and a woman, but between two men? This is the story of David and Jonathan, the love the Bible left unfinished. The first meeting, love at first sight, the moment David stepped into the royal court, Jonathan couldn't look away. The young shepherd stood before King Saul, the blood of Goliath still drying on his hands. He was supposed to be just another soldier, another nameless warrior. But Jonathan saw something else, something more. The air in the room thickened as David spoke, his voice steady, his eyes burning with something unshaken by war. Jonathan felt it in his chest, a pull, a knowing. He had fought countless battles, had seen men bleed and break, but this was different. Then, without hesitation, Jonathan did something unthinkable. He took off his royal robe, the symbol of his right to the throne, and placed it on David's shoulders. His tunic, his sword, his bow, his belt. One by one, he stripped himself of everything that made him Prince Jonathan and laid it at David's feet. "From this day forward, we are one." Jonathan's voice was low, steady. "What I have is yours," the court murmured. A prince lowering himself before a shepherd? This was more than friendship. This was devotion, a covenant. David met his gaze. No words were needed. In that moment, the shepherd and the prince became bound, not by war, not by blood, but by something neither of them had ever felt before. Something neither of them would ever feel again. Their story had begun. A love stronger than politics. As David's fame spread across the land, Saul's jealousy grew like a shadow over his throne. The people whispered of David's victories, and the king's once loyal servants began to turn toward him. But amidst the turmoil, there was Jonathan, the prince, the heir to the throne, who should have been Saul's greatest ally. But Jonathan saw something the king could not. David wasn't a threat. He was the future, a man of courage and faith, a man he had sworn loyalty to. But that loyalty came at a cost. Saul's wrath was fierce, and Jonathan was torn between family and love. "I cannot stand by and watch him kill you," Jonathan whispered, his voice full of both fear and resolve. "You are my brother, David. I will protect you." In the silence that followed, Jonathan made a choice. He gave David a signal, a way to escape without the king's men knowing. A hidden message in the form of arrows, a sign that would cost Jonathan everything. The cost was high. Jonathan's loyalty to David had become treason in his father's eyes. Saul's rage knew no bounds, but Jonathan stood firm. In the end, it wasn't the kingdom that mattered. It wasn't the throne that mattered. It was the love that had grown between the two men, a love that transcended the politics of kings and courts. The kiss goodbye, a farewell of tears. The air was thick with tension as David and Jonathan stood in the field. Their eyes locked, knowing the moment had come. Saul's fury had reached a breaking point. The king was out for blood, and David had no choice but to flee. There would be no time for promises, no time for the words they both longed to speak, only the weight of the moment. "If I die, you will carry my memory," David said softly, his voice breaking. He knew the dangers ahead. He would leave his home, his family, and the life he'd known. But Jonathan wasn't just his friend, his ally. He was his brother. Jonathan's eyes glistened, tears gathering at the corners as he stepped forward. He pulled David into an embrace, holding him tightly as though letting go would destroy him. They clung to each other in a moment of pure, raw emotion. There were no words that could fully express the pain they both felt in that instant. Then, in a desperate act of finality, Jonathan kissed David on the cheek. "Go in peace, my brother," Jonathan whispered, his voice barely audible, filled with an agony too deep for words. "I will never leave you." The kiss was more than a gesture. It was an oath, a pledge that would transcend distance, time, and even death. In that simple, tender kiss, they sealed their bond in a way words could never do. As they pulled apart, they both knew this was their last meeting. The world would change. Their paths would separate. But in their hearts, they would always carry the memory of this moment, their love, their loyalty, and their sacrifice. Their kiss goodbye was the beginning of a legacy that would never fade. Love in the shadows. After their final farewell, David's exile began. But Jonathan's heart remained with him, even though they were forced into different worlds. In the shadows of a kingdom torn apart by power, betrayal, and war, Jonathan's love for David never wavered. While Saul hunted David relentlessly, Jonathan risked everything to maintain their bond. Secret meetings in hidden caves, quiet exchanges in the dead of night, words of encouragement, promises of loyalty. Jonathan would not abandon his brother. "I know my father wants you dead, David," Jonathan confessed in the dark, his voice raw. "But I will protect you, always." Though he was bound to the throne, to his father's will, Jonathan's heart belonged to David. And that love was stronger than anything Saul could impose. "One day," Jonathan said, "you will be king, and when that day comes, I will be by your side." But until then, their love remained hidden, shrouded by the darkness of the world around them, a love that burned brighter, even in the shadows. Jonathan's death, a heart broken in battle. The battle was fierce. The Philistines had encircled the Israelites, and death was everywhere. Jonathan fought valiantly, his sword cutting through the enemy lines, determined to protect his people. But fate had other plans. "Stay with me, my brother," Jonathan had shouted to his men, leading them forward, never slowing, never fearing. But the battle raged on, and soon the unthinkable happened. Jonathan fell. In the chaos of war, a fatal wound brought him to his knees. His life, once filled with promise and loyalty, now hung by a thread. The news of Jonathan's death reached David like a dagger to the heart. He had been in hiding, but the moment the messenger arrived, David knew. He knew his brother was gone. "How could this be? How could you leave me now?" David cried, his voice breaking. "You were the light of my life, Jonathan. My brother, my friend, my heart." David's grief was overwhelming. It wasn't just the loss of a friend. It was the loss of the person who had always been there, his partner in everything. And now, Jonathan was gone. In the midst of his sorrow, David penned one of the most beautiful laments in history, a song for Jonathan, a tribute to the love and bond they had shared. "How the mighty have fallen," he cried, his voice full of heartbreak, and the world mourned with him. Legacy, a bond that transcends time. David's grief was profound. But in his sorrow, something beautiful emerged. The love and loyalty that David and Jonathan shared became legendary, a bond that would be remembered for centuries. After Jonathan's death, David took on a promise, one he would carry for the rest of his life. He called on Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, the child who had been hidden away since the fall of Saul's house. David sought him out, not as a political move, but as a way to honor the love he had for Jonathan. "Is there anyone left from the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" David asked. His words were more than a simple inquiry. They were a declaration of love, of a legacy that would live on. Mephibosheth, crippled from birth, was brought to David's court, and in a moment that spoke volumes about David's heart, he said, "You will eat at my table as one of my own sons." David's kindness to Mephibosheth was a living testament to the bond he shared with Jonathan. It was a legacy of love, loyalty, and sacrifice that would echo through the generations, proving that true love, whether between friends, brothers, or fathers and sons, never fades. A love beyond boundaries. The story of David and Jonathan is more than just a tale of friendship. It is a powerful reminder of the depth of human connection, of love that transcends all boundaries, whether bloodlines, political alliances, or the very world they lived in. David didn't just lose a friend. He lost a brother, a partner, a soulmate. Their bond was built on mutual respect, loyalty, and a love that had no room for judgment. And in the end, it was that love that David honored, even beyond death. But there's a contradiction here. The Bible, in its pages, condemns same-sex relationships. Yet David's love for Jonathan was not just affectionate, it was deep, profound, and life-altering. The way David wept for Jonathan, how he honored their bond, suggests a love far beyond mere friendship. How can the Bible condemn what it celebrates in the lives of its own figures? When we look at David and Jonathan, we're left with a question that lingers in the air. What is love? Is it truly something confined by rules, or does it stretch beyond any boundary we've created?